actually change something from my computer. I'll be right back.
Okay. I'll just stay over here. Okay.
Okay.
Are you staying there for the whole meeting?
Well, not till I'm operational. I got access to computer screen. I'm good. Oh, is it?
Can
I
you?
can't log in.
Well, try going just to the video.
Oh, I can.
On
do
there.
that. Oh, didn't think of the name tag. I could be Lilia.
No, you can't. Okay, I will call to order the City of Fort St. John Committee of the Whole meeting for October the 10th, 2017. Notice of new business for the Committee of the Whole. I have none. Council? City Manager?
None, Your Worship.
Okay. Adoption of the agenda by consensus then. And the minutes of the September 18th Committee of the Whole.
Second.
No errors or omissions in favor. Opposed, carried. And no business arising, presentations and delegations. We have the 2018-2023 strategic plan.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. This is your strategic plan, so I know you have all seen it in one form or another and have spent a lot of time in developing it. It is being presented to you officially today in the Committee of the Whole meeting so that you can put your final stamp of approval on the strategic plan. It will be presented to Council in your formal meeting on October 23rd, formal adoption, and we'll incorporate any changes that you recommended today. So your strategic plan came out of a conversation starting in the spring of this year where you felt that it was necessary to establish your top priorities and the objectives that you were looking forward to achieve over the next 5 years. So I will just go through your strategic plan. The first thing that you identified, and you spent a fair bit of time on this, was your vision statement. This vision statement is a little different than your previous one, but still follows the same tone and the intent. Fort St. John will be a flourishing community where nature lives, businesses prosper, families are active, and diversities are celebrated. Two of the main areas that you changed is families are active. You did have a focus on families in your previous vision, but this one you really want to indicate that active both physically, employment-wise, in the community was an important aspect. Diversity wasn't something that was really on your radar about 6-7 years ago as much as it is today, and so you wanted to signal to the community that our community in all its diversity was an important aspect to your vision for the community. This vision statement you'll also find in your official community plan. They are one and the same, and as they should be. Your mission statement to facilitate a community that embraces opportunity, diversity, and sustainability. We do this through the development of innovative municipal services. Again, you carefully selected each of the words that went into this mission statement. You had a lot of conversation about your role as far as a facilitator in the community versus always being in a position of having to deliver the service or an aspect yourself. Opportunity, diversity, and sustainability, again, were important for you to capture in your mission statement. You also indicated that your role as council is to support this mission through the development of innovative municipal services. The word innovative, again, was something you selected. You did indicate that one of your missions is not only to provide services, but to continue to look at ways to improve those services, to be innovative around those services, and make sure that we are always keeping an eye on improving how we deliver. Your values, with regards to the values, you took a position that your key values remain the same as they were in the last strategic plan, and this makes sense. A person or an organization's values rarely change. Time changes, project changes, objectives changes, but your values should remain the same. One of your key values is transparency. You're committed to share information with the citizens. This is something that you've been working very hard on in the last number of years. A lot of advancement through communication, social media, through Let's Talk Site C and different processes. So this was an important value that you want to continue and to move forward on. The next value was responsiveness. We're committed to listen to our citizens and work together. So sharing information is one thing, responding and working together is certainly the next step in working with the community. Again, a value that you brought over from your previous strategic plan. Innovation, you're committed to lead. You saw innovation in your mission statement. Again, one of your values is to continue to strive to be better, continuous improvement, and looking at ways to improve. The Made in Fort St. John solution is always very much forefront and center when you discuss different options. Integrity, we're committed to high ethical and professional standards. Again, a value of yours. It's really hard through any policy or legislative or code of conduct to establish and to enforce integrity. It has to be something that each and every one of you is committed to, and collectively you have indicated that's a value to you and that you will remain committed to having high ethical and professional standards. Regardless of what the legislation is, it's not about meeting the lowest bar or the minimum standards. It's about always striving to maintain a very high level. Your strategic goals. Goal number 1, enhance community economic development to provide opportunities and sustainability for Fort St. John. This goal is related to other agencies' goals. One of the things that you indicated this time was not only would you think locally or act locally, you'd also think globally. You recognize that your goals are also related to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals as established by the UN in 2016. Canada is one of the 193 countries that signed on to the Sustainable Development Goals, and you recognize that in order for Canada and the UN to achieve it, it has to happen at the local level, and you've accepted responsibility. So goal number 1, you've identified it as the SDG 8, which is to promote, sustain, inclusive, sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. And your goal aligns with that, as well as SDG 9, to build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and to foster innovation. So you'll see throughout your strategic plan, you've related it back to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and they'll just be highlighted on each one of the goals. Your second goal was to demonstrate leadership in environmental responsibility through sustainable and effective practices for municipal operations. Here, this one is a goal that when we drill down into the objectives and the projects, they have a lot of projects coming forward from the administration. Most of what we do in our municipal operations does have an impact on the environment, water, sewer, roads, parks, and you want to ensure that we are not only providing those core services to the community, but doing it in a very responsible and sustainable manner. This goal is tied to 3 SDGs. SDG 6, ensure available and sustainable management of water and sanitation. Water and sewer services, again, are critical to the health and prosperity of your community. Without good potable water and appropriate sanitation, then the whole community is at risk. SDG 7, ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy. You've talked about yourself as being the energetic city, the energy capital, and you have recognized that energy spans the whole spectrum of energy through fossil fuels to hydroelectricity to wind to solar to geothermal, but also human energy. And that takes all those forms of energies to move a community forward. SDG 13, take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. You, again, have taken a leadership role in this area. You've signed on to BC Climate Charter. You're working to reduce the organization's footprint, but also working at ways and means to reduce the community's input. One of the areas that you've identified has the largest impact on use of energies is buildings and how buildings are constructed. You've taken a strong position with your role around the development of the passive house and training in that area and trying to change how we build homes and also refurbish buildings in our community.
Goal number 3, build and manage public assets and human resources that support the current and future needs of the community. Historically, municipalities have primarily been focused on the present time of their community. You, through your policies, some of your budgeting requirements, are really also looking into the future and making sure that you're leaving your community with not only good infrastructure in the ground now, but a replacement program for the infrastructure that's been there for many years, and then thinking about how we're going to replace the current infrastructure into the future. That's just an example. You also identified people as one of your capital assets, public assets, and you want to ensure that the organization has solid human resources policies and practices that then can also assist in development of the public assets as well. That goal is related to two SDGs. SDG 6, to ensure available and sustainable management of water and sanitation. You saw this on the previous goal, and it's appropriate that more than one of your strategic goals is related to more than one SDG, and you'll see it because there is a lot of linkage between the two, and it's hard to segregate it between one or the other. SDG 11 is an interesting one. Make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, and resilient and sustainable. This is the first time the UN and throughout any of its goals, whether it was the Millennium Goals or other stretch goals that they had identified, is that the place that this is going to happen is cities. And without cities and the work at the local level, the rest of it's just is less effective to implement. And so the first time cities have their own goal, and many cities are starting to turn their mind and attention to how are we going to manage our cities to advance human settlements in the way that we want to see it advanced. Goal number 4, initiate and foster partnerships that will benefit Fort St. John. Advocate to decision makers on issues that impact the community. You realize that you can't do it all yourself, nor should you. Many of the issues that affect our community and the quality of life in community is really within the jurisdiction responsibility of an outside agency, whether it's provincial, whether it's federal, whether it's industry, whether it is something, a nonprofit organization. So you've indicated that you want to advocate on behalf of your community, see positive change happen in those areas where you, in fact, are not the decision makers. And in a lot of areas, you would like to work in partnership. And partnership has been a key value of yours over the many years. We see some very productive partnerships already in place, and you want to continue to work in partnership with others. This is related to the SDG Goal 17, strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. So partnership is recognized even at the UN level that we are in this together. We can't do it on our own, and we need to work together. Your strategic goal number 5, actualize downtown Fort St. John as a social, vibrant, livable hub as articulated in the Fort St. John Downtown Action Plan. Goal number 5 really sets itself apart in that it technically does not meet the profile of what a goal normally is. It's more tactical, it's more objective driven, but this is such a strong area of interest to yourselves as articulated by your community through your downtown action plan that you elevated it to the level of a goal. And this is one of our plans that you have indicated very strongly to administration that you want to see programs move forward to start realizing this plan. As it relates to the UN SDGs, again, SDG 11 about making cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Your downtown core is a gathering place. It's a defining area within any community. And this is something that we feel we could do, see a real progress made in this particular area. So those are your 5 strategic goals. In addition to those goals, and you will have attached to your agenda the entire document, which sets out some of your objectives. And then under the objectives, administration has set out project and activities that we need to ensure are aligned with your 5 strategic goals. We have taken the opportunity to sit with council and go through those projects and activities. And those project and activities you will see during your budget discussions. They need to appear in your budget discussions, so keep an eye on them. And if you're feeling that they're not there, question administration why they're not there. Those projects and activities will also be reviewed on a regular basis, because as one project is completed, we need to advance another project. And often, in a lot of cases, some of the activities require, it's a progression. We need to get the first part done before we can move to the second part. So you will see over the 5 years a plan for project and activities. Administration will be coming back to you on a regular basis and with a report card on how we're doing on those project activities, whether in fact they're meeting your strategic goals and objectives, whether they should be modified, or if there's a new and emerging project and activity that you feel advances one of your strategic goals that have not been identified. That report card will be reported back to council. In addition, your senior management, our performance review or our annual review will be also based on your strategic goals and how well we're delivering on our project and activities. So as you can see, everything in the organization is intended to be aligned. One of the areas that we are certainly, administration is looking at is all the master plans that you have adopted, whether it's transportation, whether it's recreation, whether it's parks, whether it's liquid waste management plans, is to ensure that those recommendations meet your strategic objectives and we deliver on those recommendations moving forward as well. So right from your strategic goals, your missions and vision statement, your values, and your linkage to a global initiative, really define this strategic plan that is quite different than your previous strategic plan. And I certainly commend council in taking this step. Administration welcomed this clarity around your strategic goals. It's going to help us a lot in putting our work plans together, our budgets together. And I'm sure by working together, we'll be able to deliver on these with regular review as well. So any questions? Again, the report is attached in its entirety, but I do welcome any questions on any of the project, the activities, or the objectives.
Council, any questions on the projects or initiatives? Councillor Clausen.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just a quick question, I guess. When we receive on a regular agenda the projects and initiatives list, I assume this is somewhat related to that. I just didn't know if those projects and initiatives would fall under those different strategic goals, or whether that's a whole separate piece.
So your strategic priorities that you had established in previous years have been incorporated in the new list of project and activities if they're still ongoing. For example, you had a strategic priority around the coalition. You will see it went under the project and activities, the continuing membership in the coalition and advancing its goal. That's just one example. So the current strategic priority list will be put to bed. It'll be removed from your agenda. It will be replaced by our new project and activity list and your strategic goals. Once you have adopted it, we will develop a reporting card saying where we are on achieving those. You will also note that each report coming to council will need a reference which strategic goal it's addressing or which objective it's addressing. And if it's not, then that's a clear indication to you to decide whether or not this is a project you want to do, whether we need to expand one of our strategic goals, or how does this particular project fit in. I suspect, though, that will happen very rarely. Your goals in and amongst themselves are fairly broad and should allow the projects and initiative we have all talked about over the last number of years to fit under these goals. But yes, you'll see the old one go away.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Not this time, Your Worship.
Just the comments. I'm really liking this and the direction we're going. When we created those goals, I don't think we were even thinking of a linkage with the UN strategic development goals. So it's an indication that we are a growing community that that really needs to broaden our horizon, but also that there's similar needs in communities worldwide. So we're not alone in where we're at. And so I found that to be really interesting. So actually having them linked to it really does help us know that we're part of a bigger picture. Also reminds me of the last energy conference that we had here, and when we had Richard Florida, who was here as our keynote speaker, and he wrote The Rise of the Creative Class Revisited. And so as I see Fort St. John starting to evolve and taking in some of these things, there's significant opportunity for Fort St. John to be a major player nationally as well as internationally, and a lot of the initiatives that we take on. So, Council, as you know, the strategic projects and activities and that whole aspect of it, where staff have defined the projects, the activities, the responsible department head, the timeline, and the evaluation, is the operational side of things. But thank you for allowing us to get into the weeds with you for a couple of hours so that we could see that, because it's important for us to know where our policy is heading. And so seeing that back end and just defining things just a little bit more if they needed to be was a good opportunity for us to see where that policy was heading. So we've popped back out of the weeds, and now we're back at the policy level, and I think that's important for us to do.
It was also important for administration to know if what we interpreted as your goal, if we interpreted it right. And whether it was a reasonable interpretation as applied with the Fort St. John lens and context and the current economic conditions that we are in right now. So it was critical for us to know that we were on the right path. Otherwise, administration may get involved in projects and activities that the council says sure it meets that goal, but that's not how we defined it.
Yep, exactly. So as you head off to any professional development, I think that kind of thing needs to be shared with your colleagues to assist other councils and staff to make sure that they're on the right path together. Just 1 degree off a path, you can wind up God knows where. I just want to finish up by saying that, I look at the vision and the mission and the values, and to me, those aren't just words on paper. They need to be our DNA. So thank you for that. I think that was significant. Council, we are going to be looking at this later on. You're all happy little campers? All right. Well, it comes up as an admin report later on in this meeting.
And Your Worship, just as a concluding remark, you'll see even in the council meeting today reference to your goals. And some of the initiative, and including the presentation that you'll be receiving on DCCs, is how does that align with that particular goal? And have we met the mark with it? So each one of these future presentations, your budget, reports to council, always be thinking as, did we hit the mark with that goal, and in all the contexts as that we have. So thank you, and it was a pleasure in working with council through these strategic goals, and looking forward now and excited about moving forward with them as well.
Good. Thank you. Okay, moving forward in the agenda, we have Development Cost Charge Bylaw Update, and we have Victor Shoplin, General Manager of Integrated Services, and John Dumbrell, Urban Systems. Gentlemen. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So it's the third time I think we've come back before Council to talk about development cost charges. We've came forward. We've had development cost charges for over 5 years now, closer to 7 now actually. And it was after 5 years this should be reviewed, so we moved into the review stage. Of course, the economy did a bit of a downturn. Council asked us to go back and talk to the people with the proposed changes, or the developers with the proposed changes. So we came back in February and talked about the results of that, and there's a summary of that in the attachments. There's also a couple of letters that we received. So there was some against and definitely also some for development cost charges. They realize the benefit of them to the community. Council, I think there's some, might be getting ahead of myself here a bit, but council had said at the last one to leave water sewer at 15%, and I think outside the box for the other, the new things that we are asking council to add, which is transportation, drainage, and parks. So with that, I'll turn it over to John, and we will go through the presentation. Also, there will be a time when I will pull up a spreadsheet, and you can roll up your sleeves a little bit there and look at some numbers differently if you want.
Your worship, members of council, as Mr. Shopland indicated, there's been work underway for the last number of months on the updated development cost charge program, engagement both of the development community as well as here at council and committees of the whole in the past, most recently in February of this year. In terms of the outcome of the last committee of the whole meeting here with council, again, as Mr. Shopland indicated, proceed with work on the bylaw, and then include all 5 categories of eligible charges. Council may recall that water and sewer are currently levied development cost charges, and those programs for both water and sewer have been updated. In addition, council asks that we also look at transportation, drainage, and parks, the other eligible categories for charging development cost charges. Providing the assist factor option, looking at maintaining the water and sewer at 15%, and then schedule today's meeting. Because today we'll be talking quite a bit about assist factors, we thought we would just refresh in terms of what some of the considerations that go into setting assist factors. First, council does have full discretion in setting the magnitude of the assist factor. It can vary in a couple of different ways. One, it can vary by service, in other words, potentially a different assist factor for water than for transportation. And it can also vary by year, as was the case with the introduction of the first development cost charge bylaw in 2012, where the phase-in period over the course of 5 years in 3 different phases occurred. However, assist factors cannot vary by land use. In other words, we can't offer a different assist factor for residential than commercial, nor can we offer a different assist factor by geographic area of the city. In other words, more for, say, the city center downtown area than an outlying area. The assist factor has to be funded by sources other than development cost charges. And so, for example, property tax revenue or utility fee revenue are the common examples of how the assist factor is funded. In terms of options, again, as Mr. Shopland indicated, we looked at a number of different ways in which the assist factors could be calculated. However, before we get to that, we wanted to look at some what we've called gross development cost charge calculations. And so here we see some numbers where no assist factor has been included, just to give council a sense of what essentially the calculated numbers would be. So down the left-hand...
Sorry, John, to clarify, we should have actually had a different column there at the end where, because the current DCCs is with the 15% assist factor on them. So the gross current DCC is a higher number.
Yeah, thank you. That's correct. So down the left-hand column here, we'll see the variety of different land uses for which development cost charges are levied: single and multifamily residential, and those are on a per unit basis. Commercial, we've used a representative building there of about 1,200 square meters. So if we think of the footprint of at the corner of 100th and 100th of Whole Wheat and Honey, along with the BC Hydro consultation office next door, essentially that's about a 1,200 square meter footprint of a commercial building. For industrial, we've used, again, a representative building there, about 1,500 square meters. If we think of the Caliber Oil and Gas Field Services complex over on Tall-Tan Road, that would be an example of an industrial building of that size. And then finally, for institutional, just over 4,200 square meters, that's a typical footprint for an elementary school. So just in terms of reference, then, those would be the kinds of land uses for commercial, industrial, and institutional. The next number of columns leading from that: water, sewer, transportation, drainage, and parks, set out what the calculated, again, these were the gross numbers based on the new capital plan for what water, sewer, and so forth the charges would be. Finally, in white there, the total new gross development cost charges. So for example, for single family residential, $11,639 per single family unit. And then, as Mr. Shopland indicated, the total current charges shown in green there, those do include the current 15% assist factor that has been offered by council. One thing we'll note there under parks is that commercial, industrial, and institutional, there's a not applicable charge. That's very common practice in British Columbia to not levy development cost charges for parks on other than residential uses. So that gives us, again, a sense of what the calculated gross development cost charges would be for the new charges without an assist factor. Next, we look at comparable municipalities, and so council may recall the council policy 5110, where it sets out a number of comparable communities in British Columbia, which are used for comparison for financial and other purposes. So what we've done is to look at those communities and say, what are their development cost charges? And we've shown them here in three different ways: what the average charge per single family residence, multifamily, and so on, what the maximum charge in those comparable communities is, and then also what the minimum charge is. Then we said, in order to reach, in this case, the average charge, what would the assist factor be required to be applied to the city's calculated rates? So here again, I'll use single-family residential as an example. So for a single-family residential unit, were the city of Fort St. John to offer a 1% assist factor, that would result in a single-family charge in Fort St. John of $11,523 per unit. That would take us actually below what the average charge would be in comparable municipalities. The difference, other than the 1% charge for residential, commercial, and industrial, we'll see in the case of institutional, it would require a 7% charge to take us to the average, which is approximately $195,000. At a previous Committee of the Whole conversation, Council did inquire about comparisons to Alberta municipalities, which are also on Council's comparable list. The reason we haven't included those here is that there's quite different legislation in Alberta than is the case in British Columbia, so it would be essentially an apples to oranges comparison. Okay, moving on from comparing the city to comparable examples, here we've shown if Council chose to use the phase-in approach that was chosen for the 2011 development cost charge bylaw and applied that to the newly calculated rates. Council may recall that in the initial 2 years, so it actually began on January 1st, 2012. So 2012 and 2013 was a 40% assist factor, 2014 and 15 was 25%, and 2016 onward at 15%. Again, these just applied to the water and sanitary sewer services. So were that same phase-in approach used in this instance, we can see what the charges would be there. Again, using single family as a residential as an example, $6,983 per single family unit with a 40%, $87.29 for 25%, and then $98.93 at a 15%. In terms of specific comparables, we looked at two other communities. Here we see the city of Dawson Creek, and in a moment we'll see the Peace River Regional District, Charlie Lake area. So in the case of Dawson Creek, which charges at this time only for water and sanitary sewer services, we see the city's rates. So for single-family residential, $5,981. In order to reach that same level, an across-the-board assist factor of 49% would be required for the city of Fort St. John to apply to residential rates. We see a difference there depending upon the land use of varying different assist factors. So for example, multifamily residential would need to be 51% to reach the city of Dawson Creek rates, commercial at 33%, industrial at 22%, and institutional at 39%. So it looks like a bit of an odd comparison, but the reason there is that, again, Dawson charges just for water and sanitary sewer, whereas the city's program is being looked at all the services, including roads, drainage, and parks as well. So that's why the difference in the different assist factor levels.
So just to
clarify, the single-family residential per unit required from the city of Fort St. John at 59.36, that is all inclusive of the parks and living.
Correct.
That's correct, Your Worship. Okay, and then finally, in terms of comparison, here we see the Peace River Regional District Charlie Lake rates. These apply just to sanitary sewer. That's the only service that's charged for at Charlie Lake. And so we see for a single-family residence at Charlie Lake, $8,548 per single-family residence. In order to reach that same level of charge, the City of Fort St. John would have to apply to the full range of services an assist factor of 26%. As Mr. Shoplin mentioned, there was a variety of input that came on at about the same time as the last Committee of the Whole meeting. First, there was a letter on February 28th to Mayor and Council from Mr. Henry, who I believe attended that day as well, and raised a variety of concerns regarding some previous consultation that had happened with the development community on January 25th. The attachments to the council report today provide the responses to those questions, which were things like the capital plan that had been prepared, how the capital plan had been apportioned, the costs in it between resolving some existing challenges in the community and new development, and a range of different issues such as that. In addition to that, there was also a response on February 27th to Ken Rogers from Brian Cranfield with Real North Opportunities, and then to Ms. Hunter, the city manager, from Jim Radford with the XJW Evergreen Estates Group. In the latter two cases, both supportive of the notion of development cost charges and in general agreement, certainly in the case of Mr. Cranfield, for a phased-in approach to new rates. In terms of moving forward, some suggestions are provided here for council's contemplation. Looking toward a decision on the assist factor, hopefully through today's deliberations. Should council choose to do so, then moving forward with the actual development cost charge bylaw and the background report that supports all the calculations and so forth in that bylaw over the course of the next month or so. Come back to council for 3 readings of the bylaw in the mid-November meeting. Then refer the bylaw as well as the background report to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing and the Inspector of Municipalities, which typically is about a 3-month process. And so we'll see there from November through till February of 2018. Adoption of the bylaw in March of 2018, and then implementation beginning right away. With respect to implementation, there are some conditions that are set out under the Local Government Act, which actually have effect on or influence the implementation of the bylaw. And these come generally in the form of exemptions. So I might just like to spend a moment running through some of the details on this slide here. Generally speaking, new DCC rates are imposed at the time of subdivision for single-family residential and for building permits for all other uses, multifamily, commercial, industrial, institutional, from the date of the DCC bylaw adoption forward. So that would be if the schedule on the prior page were adhered to from March 2018 forward. There are, however, some exemptions from those new DCC rates. First off, anything that's previously approved subdivision and a building permit where DCCs have already been levied are not charged the new rates. Second, subdivisions that are already in process and the application submitted and the fees paid receive a 12-month grace period after the date of DCC bylaw adoption. And then similarly, new building permits, or actually even the precursors to building permits in the form of development permits if they're relevant, or a rezoning, is already in stream at the date of DCC bylaw adoption, is also shielded from the new rates for a period of 12 months. So essentially those last 2 bullets are grace periods of 1 year that are provided to new subdivisions or building permits that are already in stream at the time of new DCC bylaw adoption. Mr. Shoplin, would you like to, or would you like me to continue on?
Do this one first and then we'll.
Okay. So working with staff, the following recommendation has been provided for council's consideration. So we'll see again our land uses down the left-hand column here. And then in the three columns to the right of that, the proposed DCC rates with the relevant assist factors. So in years 1 and 2, continuing on with the 15% water and sewer assist factor, and putting in a 40% assist factor for transportation, parks, as well as drainage. Then in years 3 and 4, continuing with the 15% water and sewer and moving to 25% for the other services. And then finally from year 5 onward, 15% assist factor for the full range of services. Along with those come the variety of rates that we see there. Now I appreciate that the council doesn't have an earlier slide in front, but for reference purposes, where we, relative to the comparable municipalities that we saw earlier, this would mean that at no point would we hit the minimum rates that were shown on the earlier slide. But in every case, Fort St. John would be below the average rates of comparable municipalities throughout this entire period. Your Worship, members of council, thank you for your attention and be pleased to take any questions.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to Victor and John for the presentation. We had a very extensive conversation at the staff level in presenting a recommendation to council and what that recommendation would be. We went with the principle that you've already made a decision with water and sewer at the 15%. So while the water and sewer program includes an expanded program because you've completed some projects, but you're moving towards other projects, your previous decision at the Committee of the Whole has been the 15% assist factor. So we retain that and respect that decision from council. In addition, we took a look at your discussion at your last DCs where you went from a 40 to 25 to a 15% assist factor. You started at a fairly high assist factor and reduced it down to 15%. We felt that phased-in approach worked well for you and the community with your water and sewer program, our water and sewer program. And so we applied the same thinking, the same philosophy to the three new categories, which is transportation, parks, and drainage. And we went with the same phase-in factor, where the assist factors at the 40% would be held at the 40% for year 1 and 2, year 3 and 4, the 25, and year 5 at 15%. The lowest assist factor that you can consider is 1%. There can be no such thing as a zero assist factor. Currently in transportation, drainage, and parks, you have a 100% assist factor in that you're subsidizing the development in those areas out of general taxation or your Peace River agreement money. So based on that, we also felt it was critical for council and hearing council over the last 2 years in particular, that you did not want to be too aggressive on your DCCs, and so we targeted less than the average for the end result to be less than average. We felt that it's better for a softer introduction of DCCs into the community based on a program that you've already done, the 40, 25, 15, and not to target an average. We felt that that was too high of a target to aim for and probably inappropriate this economic time in our community. We also wanted to highlight for council that for the most part, you will not, if you move forward with these DCs in whatever form here in the next month or two, you will really not see revenues coming in on these new DCs until 2019. Moving forward. So there is a very long lag time between the adoption of the bylaw and its actual impact on your DCC revenues. For the most part, we've got development midstream, in-stream and development, so they will not be impacted. And new development has, if they're proceeding, it also has that time to adjust. What we've heard from the business community and the development community is what they were looking for was fair, equitable DCCs that are justified on projects that are very tangible and need to be done in the community. Your project, your list of projects will be referred to the ministry. It will be reviewed by ministry staff to ensure that your projects are reasonable and that they are required and they are a result of growth to the extent that we say that they are. That the development community asks for time to adjust to the new DCC. So when they look at their business case, when they look at their development program, knowing what the DCCs are moving forward, they know how to phase in their development and they know what the costs are going to be moving forward. However, there's no magic in the 40-25-15. It's a phase-in model that you adopted the last time around. It's arbitrary to that extent as to what you're trying to target. We tried to target DCCs just above the minimum, and that's what our goal is, and based on your past model.
So, could you explain on, where's the slide? Timing considerations, implementation of new DCC rates. The first bullet, new DCC rates imposed at time of subdivision for single-family residential or building permit for other uses, all other uses. So why are we singling out the single-family residential?
Thank you, Your Worship. Single-family residential is the only one of those uses where we know at the time of subdivision exactly what's going to be constructed on the property and the extent of construction, knowing that each parcel has been subdivided and one home going on each parcel. In all the other cases, we won't know number of units in the case of multifamily residential or the building area for commercial, industrial, or institutional until the building permit's actually submitted. And so that's why essentially the delay in the case of multifamily residential and those other uses in comparison. If municipalities, I believe it's fair to say, had their druthers, would like to collect everything at the time of subdivision because it's that much earlier in the process then, but because of that lack of kind of real knowledge about what's going on in the parcel, that's why the others are delayed till those later periods at building permit.
So this would actually be at the time of subdivision for R1, because we have single family with the secondary suite on R2.
That's correct, Your Worship.
So even with the R2, single family, would it be collected at that time?
If R2 is, or excuse me, sorry, I don't, in the zoning bylaw, is single-family residential the only permitted use on R2?
No.
Duplex as well, yeah. So that's correct, yeah, it's just the single-family residential, R1 or R2 at the time of subdivision.
R2 would be a building permit.
Building permit.
So if they were building a single family with a legal secondary suite in R2, then they would pay the DCC when the building permit is taken out.
That's, yes.
We're gonna have to make sure we got that.
Right, because you could build a single-family dwelling on an R2 lot. So I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think that is correct.
Yeah. If I may, Your Worship, with respect to secondary suites, that's a very challenging development cost charge related question for all municipalities because local governments don't always know when that suite is going in. And there's a provision that if the building permit is for less than $50,000, which is often the case with a partially finished single family home that a suite goes in afterwards, the building permit's for less than 50, then the development cost charges can't be collected. So suites in particular are a challenging situation for all communities.
Oh, yes. We're just gonna have to make sure that when this bylaw is written up, that it's very clear on exactly where that comes out. Mr. Stewart.
Looking at Hanson here.
Sorry, that's all good. My question is just in regards to the institutional buildings. I have to look over at Councillor Clausen's screen, who's not in front of me, but just in weighing it out in my head, it's the province who is building a school, buying the land, or having land provided, however that works out. We know that we are getting a school built. We are expecting another school built. Are we subsidizing another level of government? And this is where I'm weighing off. 100% subsidizing, 40%, 25, 1% we're subsidizing another level of government. Where does that money come from? Ideally the province, but is it our school district that it gets hung out with the bag? Thus it's the families, thus it's the PACs, thus it's whatever. I don't have a specific question, just rolling around in my head of who's paying for what.
So in the case of institutional, like mostly it's provincial, whether it's hospital or school or some other form of institutional building. It could be our own institutional building though as well, like a fire hall is classed that, right?
And I get that. It's just it really like we have a brand new hospital. We got a new fire hall. I know RCMP is on the lookout here for the future, but it's schools is where my concern is, which is not supposed to be our responsibility.
So the capital dollars come from the province? And-
Supposed to.
Well, no, they do, because we did not sell the land to School District 60, we sold it to the Ministry of Education. Right, so the province builds the schools and the school district operates them, same thing with the hospital. And that's why we donated the land to them. So
Yeah.
I'm
No, I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
because we're subsidizing.
always,
Well, I get it.
if
but
this was the
If
only.
we're not gonna question it now, then we're saying, okay, so I'm questioning it a little bit. And then I'll go specifically where we're going, water and sewer, absolutely then, for sure, because schools use water and sewer, but they're providing parks and they do their own maintenance. We're not doing the maintenance. So if we're going forward with that and we're gonna do a 40-25, what have you, like, where does that go?
So are you suggesting year 1 and year 2, under institutional, the assist factor gets changed?
Well, I'm wondering if that's possible. What,
Well,
I
It
are we
can be.
taking on more than what we should in specific, to my mind? My mind right now is focused on an elementary school. Not a hospital, not the other institutions that are there, strictly on a school. Because it is Ministry of Education's determination. And then there's roads around it and there's water and sewer to it, but they are providing the park space. I just-
City manager.
Thank you, Worship. And Councillor Stewart has sort of hit on the complexities of DCCs, because if you change one aspect, you change it for them all. So with institutional, just to back up a little bit, with regards to institutional building permits, LAS's DCCs apply to a development of a school or a hospital or an RCMP detachment. Their cost of the development and need to be built into the business case around the building of that facility. And in the case of a school and the hospital, our experience is the province will pay for it if they know about it when they are moving forward with their project. So having said that, at an institutional, at 40% assist or 25 or 15, the difference between 40 and 100%, the general taxpayer is picking up that cost. But if you go back to the presentation, if you wanted a 1% assist factor so that all the costs for that institution is borne by, let's say, the senior level of government, not our general taxpayer, you then need to apply that assist factor to all the other land use classes. Okay. So you are then making a decision to apply a 1% assist factor, because if you go back to slide 4 of 14, you cannot vary the assist factor by land use or by geographic area. So it is a dull tool that we're working with. But it is the only tool. Based on your comment though about parks, it is recognized that institutional uses really do not use park space. They don't generate a need for park space. So whether you're commercial, industrial, or institutional. In the case of schools, they pretty much they also contribute park space to the community, but they do not pay anything. DCCs for parks does not apply to those 3 categories by legislation, because that's already been identified by the provincial government that they do not put a burden on our parks. Commercial, residential, basically residential puts the pressure on the parks. It's people that put the pressure on the parks. So again, a dull tool, but if you move the assist factor for institution, you move it for all of them. So there is no correct answer. Like I said earlier, there's no magic in the 40, the 25, and the 13. So you're trying to balance, trying to facilitate the development of those type of services in your community, share in the cost of some of those critical infrastructure community needs in our community, so a school and a hospital, but you're also trying to shift some of the burden off of our taxpayer onto the provincial government.
So when it says that we can vary the assist factor by the year, we're assuming
Is in
that it's all the same land uses, that we're changing the that phase-in time. So we can't take this dull tool and turn it sideways and use it as a
You
screwdriver.
can, so you can say there's going to be an assist factor in year 1 at 80% for parks. You can say, or for roads or for drainage.
But we all,
Service, you can
but for
vary it by year.
all of the land uses,
Then it's that,
all of the
Yes.
years have to be the same. We can vary those years.
Yes.
But they have to be the same through the land
yeah,
use.
you can vary the service. So you got 80% for roads, 60% for parks, 20% for drainage, right? So you can play around with that, but whatever, where you vary land in that one particular year applies to all land uses.
Got it. Occasionally, my mother would use a butter knife for a screwdriver, so I thought maybe there was a chance of.
It would make it more complicated to vary it by land use and year, but there's many occasions that would probably make it a reasonable thing to do to vary it by both. So you are treating institutional as a separate category for transportation, for drainage, and you could vary it by year, but you're not allowed to do that. You can vary it by year, and you can vary it by the service. And that's the area that you can massage and reflect your community's needs.
All right. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
There's
Councillor
mud,
Boland.
it's difficult.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. I think the assist factor is important, especially now. We're in a market where that industry has seen upwards of 1,500 job losses in the last year and a half. So it'd be nice to see some of that getting back happening. Finding that level spot where we can do that, I think, is key, where it's not going to hinder the industry from rebuilding, as you will, no pun intended, as far, and the commercial side as well, right? Some of the commercial numbers we look at, goes from 94 cents a square foot right now to $4 a square foot under the original proposed, right? So I think that assist factor is certainly going to help us in encouraging both business and that industry to regrow. So I appreciate seeing this. Thank you.
Good. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the report in, and I'm sure we're going to see more of it. You look like you have something to say, Victor.
I'm just hoping to get a little guidance. Council
course you
is
Well, it's our
at least
policy not to make
willing
decisions in front
contemplate
of.
the recommendation.
Before we come to the next meeting, won't it?
There's,
Will there be a report, admin report coming to?
There isn't a separate report, there's this
Not today.
presentation and the attachments. So it's at this point, if you can give us some direction in committee of the whole, you're not formalizing it until administration brings back a bylaw
which would be next
and a report.
council.
And we would like to do that at the November meeting, if we knew which direction you wanted to go. So if you could give us your recommendation versus decision, your decision will come with the bylaw.
Okay. Councillor Clausen.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just looking at that staff recommendation, to me, that makes sense. I think it does balance, even as Councillor Boland said, it balances the need to get to where we want to, but doesn't throw it all in at once. So I think the staff recommendation is appropriate.
Recommendation.
that'd
So
be my
you're making a
recommendation would
motion
be
to recommend to council that
Yes, that we accept the staff recommendation.
and that it come back to us as a bylaw.
Yes.
That's been seconded. Councillor Boland.
Thanks, Your Worship. I like that we've got it broken out with the staff recommendation. I would have really liked to have seen more options. I would have liked to have seen what a 25 and 40 to a 15 and 30 to a 15 would have been in this. And the only reason I say that is when I look at industrial, industrial or the single family and commercial, those are the ones that are going to be directly impacted back to individuals. So we're gonna charge $8,600 more based on this one option. Every house buyer in Fort St. John in the next 2 years is no longer going to pay $3,999. They're going to pay $410,000, right? So that's my concern with only the one option is we immediately put housing prices up $10,000 with this decision.
So just to clarify that, all existing lots, and there's a pretty good
Amount of them.
amount of empty lots currently on the market have already paid their DCCs, will not be affected by this. It would only be for brand-new subdivisions in the future. So anything that's currently out there as an empty R1 lot has already paid and is not affected. So housing prices will not be immediately affected by this.
So when I look at this, year one and year two at 15% water and sewer, 40% everything else, it's about $50 more than what the regional district is just doing for sewer.
Yes.
Just for sewer. Okay, so there's been a motion, and it's been seconded to bring back a bylaw that looks at the staff recommendations. Any further questions, comments, concerns? Seeing no hands raised in favor, opposed, carried. And correspondence, thank you, gentlemen. Fort St. John Community Arts Council, a letter was received in response to council's request for clarification regarding matching grants from the province. So this was a conversation when I was away at the Livable Cities, I'm assuming?
Yes, just
Yeah.
need
Does this-
clarity, so just receive for information.
Yeah.
Okay, but the decision's already been made to
Yes.
give it to him, okay, good. Report from city manager and administration, strategic plan. Did you want to recommend to council that it be approved?
Yes, Your Worship. I'd make that recommendation.
Moved and seconded? In favor? Opposed? Carried. No new business. Resolution to move to a closed meeting, section 90, meetings that may or must be closed to the public. Part of a council meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered relates to or is one or more of the following. K, negotiations, related discussions respecting the proposed provision of municipal service that are in their preliminary stages, and that in the view of council could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality if they were held in public. 2, part of a council meeting must be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered relates to or one or more of the following. Consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to negotiations between the municipality and the provincial government or the federal government or both, or between a provincial government or the federal government or both, and a third party. Mover and a seconder, please.
So moved, Your Worship.
Moved and seconded. In favor? Opposed? Carried. We're adjourned and we'll take, can we do 5 minutes? And then move right into the closed committee of the whole, please?